In my humble opinion, Warhaven is the vision that For Honor had before it became Rainbow Six Siege 2 Medieval Boogaloo. It's a pretty balanced 12v12 PvP game set in a medieval age with elements of futuristic fantasy. For starters, I'm going to go over some of the classes, starting with the first class, which is personally my favorite. It's Blade. The reason why he's my favorite is because it's like the generic, stereotypical, like, you know how those memes where it's like, I wonder what kind of character I should create for my RPG game? That's Blade. Normal dude with a long sword, and his attacks are pretty basic, and he's not the best, but I just like him. Usually anybody that jumps into this game would probably start as him and probably play as him for the longest period of time. Maybe if they get into the next class, which is Spike, I think Spike is the most main character besides one of the later classes I'm going to mention. But let's talk about Spike for a little bit. So Spike is a long-range spear fighter, and she's a lot more speedy. She can parry things, jolts back, and then lunges forward with a counterattack. She's just really agile. I think because of her versatility, she's the strongest character to play. Next character that we have, which is our first tank of the game, is Warhammer. He's a big, beefy dude, moves slow, he attacks slow, but his great hammer does a lot of damage, especially since you can charge it up. When you actually like throw that thing down, it just fucking decimates people. I see a lot of people use this, I guess just to get like easier kills, because you could really just break through guards and defenses and stuff like that a little bit easier with Warhammer. And he has like a few stun moves where he like plunges his hammer into the ground, it stuns people in an area, he has a headbutt that can break guards. So it's pretty good. He's a pretty solid tank choice. The next tank is Warhammer. He has a mace and a shield. Arguably, he has the best defense. He's mainly here to like hunker down with a shield, take a bunch of hits, and then deal out a little bit of damage, you know, after the fact. The thing that's kind of annoying about him is that people like to spam his shield slam and shield charge skills. Put their shield down. When they do that, they become, I think, unstoppable, which means that they just don't take damage. Then they combo into a charge, and the charge knocks everybody like up in the air. I see Spike and Guardian a lot. They're kind of cheap to use, but not really. You can still beat them. Earlier, I was saying that the game was pretty balanced. It has a few problems with balancing. Like, obviously, not everybody is like built the same way, and especially the way that your team overall organizes themselves and like which roles they choose and whatnot determines the difficulty of the match. Hush, the only like assassin character of the game, hits really quick, but she's like really quick to die because she has such little health. But the benefit of her and her speed is that she can do a lot of like dodging moves. She does have a guard break move as well. She just has like crazy range in one of her attacks where she just slides across the floor and she deals an attack but also kind of like dodges at the same time. It's a little strange, but she's another pretty good one. I don't see her at least done well in a lot of matches. Some people do play as her, but then they're just getting their asses handed to them because they don't know how to play to their strengths of, you know, being speedy, get in a lick, and then dip. The next character is Smoke, the only healer in the game besides one of these special classes, which again I'll mention later. She's kind of like Mercy from Overwatch. You know, she just shoots some healing smoke at you. Probably the weakest of the bunch. She does have like a kind of like a force push thing to deter enemies, and she has a dodge and a teleport skill. She's pretty good with evasiveness. I'm just there chasing them for 5+ minutes because these guys are just nasty with the, you know, sending their clone forward and then they teleport to that and then they use their dashes and they smoke push me off of the like a ledge, and then I have to run back up to that. It's you know, if you're good at it, you're good at it. It's definitely a difficult class to play because obviously you're not in the spotlight. You're not going to be doing damage. You're there purely for support. Speaking of the support in the game that you can do is essentially like a super. So you get a gem at the beginning of a match where you can turn into an immortal. The immortals are 4 characters which are essentially gods. They have their super specific powers. They have like a little time limit, like a little meter of how long you can use them that runs out, and then typically that's it for the match. Sometimes you might be able to get 2 immortal usages in one match, but more often than not, you're probably not going to. The first one is going to be Martyr. Looks like Millennia from Elden Ring, but essentially it's just a buffed up version of Blade, and she has a shield. She has a parry, and she has infinite dodges. She's a really offensive based super. The next one is basically Shirk from Berserk. She just locks on to like a whole field of enemies, and she can just like launch a bunch of like heat-seeking crows, and they all track the enemies, blow up. Sometimes you get the kill, sometimes you just get them like right near death and stuff like that, but she's pretty good for, you know, some long range support. I think she's pretty fun to use, especially like when you're doing death matches and all the enemies are bunched up in a nice chunky group. You get that predator missile thing off, and it's beautiful. The next one is going to be Hoet, basically Crypto from Apex. His thing is that he can set like a protective damage barrier over his allies, and he can also mass revive. He can quick revive enemies. He's pretty nasty. Like for the people that know how to play support and they stay out of trouble and they're just leaning back, and you see all of your teammates get wiped, and you can bring them all back, and then you buff them, and it's a really solid character. Dark Gale, after extended playtime on his super, I think he might be the worst of the bunch. He is really hard to control sometimes. You can traverse long distances pretty easily. His basic attack is just that he swings a spear around, and then you can also charge, and then you can also rear your horse, and it like does a little stun damage to nearby enemies. But it's just, I don't know, I've always felt like his character was a little bit tough to control, and like how I aim my spear and who I hit and whatnot. Maybe that's just a nitpick, and obviously before I started this little like mini review, I made sure that I dropped a chunk of hours with multiple characters on multiple game modes just to make sure I'm like as objective as possible. Going off of that, we're gonna talk about gameplay a little bit. So gameplay is kind of similar to Overwatch. It's focused on teamwork and class optimization, like I talked about a little bit earlier. You know, if, for example, your team runs into a match and you just have all tanks, then you're probably gonna have a tough time. Because most of the time, the teams that I see that succeed, both mine and the enemy teams, are teams with at least 2 or 3 healers just in rotation. Healing is very, very vital for like capturing points. Speaking of points, you have to, more often than not, capture the side points so that you can maintain the main point. Let's say you have to go up the hill and capture the cannon, so that way you get aerial support for the cart that you're moving down on the bottom floor. You have to focus on the entire battlefield in order to make sure that you're doing the best that you can with your team. And there's a lot of emphasis on moving with your squad. You have 3-man squads. A lot of perks in the game revolve around being nearby your squad, because you can get increased recovery rate to your health, increased health in general, faster sprint speed, more damage, more stamina recovery, all that good stuff. Fighting in the game is a little wonky because of the hit registration. Sometimes I'll make an attack with Spike and I'll go just ever so slightly past a dude's helmet and I won't hit him. On the inverse, if they did that to me, they'd hit me 9 times out of 10. Maybe that's a connection issue or whatnot. That's actually another thing. You don't get to choose which servers you play on. The maps look pretty nice graphically. The aesthetic is really cool. You know, you have some desert maps, you have some woodland like river maps and stuff like that, and they look nice, but a lot of them are 3-lane maps. It does get a little bit repetitive when you have such a similar concept brought into every single match. Yeah, you go left, right, or middle, and that's pretty much it. Like, you don't have a lot of innovation outside of that. The story, they show you a few cinematics at the beginning of the game when you first start it up. It's nice to look at. You get a kind of like gist of the world and the technology that everybody has. Is a little generic. It's similar to For Honor. Essentially, the gods, the immortals, sustain themselves off of war, and the humans try to appease the gods by going to war. And so it's a nice little cycle. They just keep doing the same old song and dance, and it keeps everybody happy, apparently. Voice acting is cringe. It's so cringe. It's the same generic, breathy, anime like Deku fucking kind of voice acting, and it has limited lines for each character. So you'll be hearing like, I hear Blade make the same comment about having no plans to die today like a million times per match, and it just gets on my nerves. Like I had to turn the voices all the way down because I was just tired of hearing it. The music is pretty generic as well. It's like a standard drum and trumpet march kind of vibe. It plays like the same couple of songs throughout the match. There's no dynamic change in the music. I've seen this game on TikTok just being advertised. I was just like, yeah, you know what? This game looks like it might be up my alley. Obviously, I like third-person medieval games. I like swords and shit like that, so why not give it a try? The graphics look pretty solid, and you know, the gameplay looks interesting from the trailers that I saw on TikTok. I was very skeptical at first because I was like, oh, this is probably another one of those fucking games that, you know, super microtransaction heavy. The gameplay doesn't look anything like the trailer is showing. But no, I was happily surprised that this is just a normal free-to-play game. So far, there's no spyware. I don't need anybody taking my information or using my GPU to mine Bitcoin or some bullshit like that. I thought I would just share that with you guys. I love you, and I'll catch you in the next one. Deuces.